Boxing promoter Frank Warren has revealed the fights he's lined up for his new stable of Olympic fighters. James DeGale, Frankie Gavin and Billy Joe Saunders will all meet opponents from former Iron Curtain countries when they make their long-awaited professional debuts. That's at the NIA Birmingham on February the 28th. And I'm pleased to say joining us on the line now is Frank Warren. Frank, thanks very much for joining us. Do talk me through the three bouts and their challenges.
Yes, James DeGale's taking on, I've got to be able to pronounce this, the guy called Vepkia Tushiliai, and he's a 21-year-old kid from Tbilisi in Georgia. He's fought here a couple of times, and it'll be a good fight for James for his first fight, for his debut fight, and obviously I'm looking forward to that. Whilst Frankie Gavin, who's the former world amateur champion, he's fighting another Georgian, a 22-year-old called George Candaria, which again will be a decent test for him for his first fight. And Billy Joe Saunders, who's Olympian, who comes from Hertfordshire, will face a Hungarian light welterweight champion, Attila Molnar. Former light welterweight champion. So he's probably got the toughest test out of the three of them. But yeah, they're good fights for their debuts, which takes place in Birmingham on the 28th of February.
The opponents' names, I'm glad you pronounced them, Frank, and not me. They're not big names, not that well known. Is it part of the plan to maybe keep the pressure off them on their professional debuts, because there's going to be enough pressure as it is?
Well, there's plenty of pressure on them. Obviously, it's their first fight, and you know, these are the type of opponents I would expect most boxers, and certainly the calibre of these guys, to face. You know, it's all about them now. You know, they're obviously no longer amateurs, and it's about them now learning their trade as professionals. And these are the type of fighters I hope will give them some opposition that they'll learn from.
Will they be fighting over, Frank?
Sorry?
How many rounds will they be fighting?
They start off as four rounders, because that's what the Boxing Board of Control regulations are for new professionals.
You weren't tempted then to throw in Olympic gold medalist James DeGale into a big money fight. I suppose protecting the record is quite important at this stage of his career, and to build on that. Well, it's not
about protecting the record. It's about him learning his trade. I mean, you know, amateur boxing, he's done it as an amateur. He's now a pro. It's a totally different game, totally different way of fighting. It's not you're not scoring points off on computers. It's not, you know, they're 4 rounds in amateurs, but you know, he's got to build up to fighting 6, 8, 10, and then for title distances 12 rounds. So he's got to learn his trade. You know, no more different than, say, a young footballer such as Theo Walcott had to do when he started with Arsenal. He'd come on as a substitute and gradually ease himself into the big games.
Definitely, Frank. And do you have a plan to have them in action quite a few times this year, don't you?
Yes, they'll fight a minimum of 6 times this year, I hope, and maybe even 8, but we'll see how they go. But the objective is to keep the 3 of the guys together, take them around the country so that the public can see them in the flesh and build up their profiles, and obviously, more importantly, get experience from them so we can move them into championship class.
And you talk about championship class, what sort of time scale do you give them? It's like, as you mentioned, of course, their first professional fight. What time scale do you give them until you see them fighting for titles?
Well, I see James and Frankie. I think you know, they maybe get 10 or 12 fights under their belt. Maybe they could be boxing for an English title by then. But we'll have to see how it goes, because obviously, you know, it's not easy to predict what happens with a boxer. We see that with Amir Khan, whose career was sort of put on hold for us when he got knocked over. But we've got to make sure that, you know, they do learn, as I say, and when the time's right, we'll look for the title challenge.
And how are these 3 settling into your stable and, of course, a professional lifestyle?
Well, they're all enjoying it. They're all enjoying it. They're training with 3 different trainers, and they seem to have got great rapport with their trainers. And they're the guys who'll be work with them on a daily basis. That's Jimmy Tibbs, who looks after Billy Joe. We've got Anthony Farnell looking after Frankie Gavin, and Jimmy McDonald, former world champion. He's looking after James DeGale. They're building building up a great sort of bond between all of them, and hopefully they'll help, along with myself, guide them through to bigger and better things.
Particularly confident ahead of their professional debuts this month.
Yeah, I mean, if they can't win these fights, then we are in trouble. I should think they'll. You know, I'm looking forward to them. Say getting this out of the way. It's going to be quite a nervy night for them. You know, making the debut for anybody is you know, there's a bit more pressure on them, but I think they're capable enough, and I think they're quality performers, and hopefully they'll all come through okay.
Okay, Frank, thanks very much for joining us. That's in Birmingham, February the 28th. Fantastic stuff.
Thanks, Charlotte.
To boxing now. Of course, Frank Warren's Olympic stars face a bit of an East invasion. They make their long-awaited professional debuts in Birmingham on February the 28th. James DeGale, Frankie Gavin and Billy Joe Saunders all meeting opponents from former Iron Curtain countries. And joining me on the phone now is Setanta's very own boxing guru, the lovely Steve Blunt. Steve, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Charlotte.
What do you make then of these opponents?
Well, I think they're the sort of guys we expected. I think, if anything, they're slightly better than we expected, and that's why Frank Warren is Frank Warren, because he's the best in the business. He's not the most successful promoter in Britain and Europe for nothing. He's the most successful boxing promoter in Britain and Europe because he's good at his game, and he's gone out and he's found three guys, all of whom look okay. None of them have got losing records. None of them fall over once they're hit on a regular basis, and there's a little bit of history with all of them. You can do a bit of swapping and chasing and find guys who fought guys and fought other guys by way of comparison. But for first fights, it's good. And plus, I didn't hear what Frank said earlier on, but I know one thing. He didn't say these will be tests, and that's been the problem in the past. When some big-named amateurs have turned professional, Charlotte, they bragged and boasted and said, this is going to be a really big test. There's not going to be a big test for at least a year, because that's the way it's always been.
Yes, see, that is exactly what Frank said. He's easing them into it. So they're quite smart picks then, would you say? Of course, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these three guys being their professional debut.
So they're very smart guys, and the thing is, because they're from either the former Soviet Republic of Georgia or the Eastern Bloc country of Hungary, they will have amateur pedigree. And that's what the three boys, the three British guys, the three English kids have got, the Olympians, as Frank Warren's dubbed them. They've got fantastic amateur pedigree. So don't expect these fights to be, you know, Rocky against Apollo Creed rematch. They won't be that. They'll be boxing matches. And I expect Billy Joe to somehow catch up with Molnar, and I expect James DeGale to try like a nutcase to catch up with the unpronounceable Vepkia from Tbilisi in Georgia. But as for Frankie Gavin, he'll have a little float around against the other Georgian, Georgi Kadaria, and that's the way Frankie Gavin will go. And I think what the public needs to understand is that these three guys are quality boxers first and foremost. They might turn into sluggers and Rocky-style characters, but they're quality boxers. And we're going to be seeing some quality sports, some quality boxing with these three this year.
So they are apparently going to be having around about 6 fights this year.
I hope so.
You say they're quality boxers. Bright futures ahead then for all three of them, Steve?
Absolutely.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.